I watched my parents toss a wooden box into the river and leave. As I ran closer, I caught a faint noise from within. "Please be empty," I murmured, pulling it ashore. I forced it open, and what I found inside— can you imagine the betrayal? Seeing your own parents, the very people who taught you right from wrong, standing by a creek, abandoning a baby? A tiny, helpless life, left to die, all for the sake of a shattered reputation. This isn't just a story. It's the moment my world and everything I thought I knew about my family utterly collapsed. My name is Mason Beaumont, and I'm 31 now, living a quiet life in Nashville, chasing sunsets and candid smiles with my camera. It's a freedom I desperately needed, a world away from the suffocating weight of the Beaumont name. That name, back in Franklin, Tennessee, was a monument. Our sprawling estate, those towering white columns, it was the Beaumont legacy, built on generations of wealth and, more importantly, reputation. My father, Harrison Beaumont, at 58, was the king of that kingdom. Sharp, authoritative, with eyes that could cut through lies. He was the embodiment of Southern prosperity, but to me, he was a dictator. Every breath, every gesture had to follow his rules. My mother, Beatrice, 55, was pure elegance, flawless on the surface. But beneath that perfect smile, I saw a quiet fear of disappointing my father, of tarnishing our meticulously crafted image. She kept everything running, but sometimes I'd catch a lost look in her eyes, wondering if she even knew what she was living for. Then there was Lucia, my 25-year-old sister. She was the only light in that cold, perfect house. Golden hair, clear blue eyes, a smile that could melt anything. They groomed her to be the ideal Beaumont woman, intelligent, graceful, captivating. But Lucia dreamed of painting, of wild brush strokes and freedom. Dreams she only dared whisper to me late at night. She was the only one who made me feel a flicker of warmth, a trace of genuine love in that rigid world. We were Franklin's elite. Sundays at church, charity galas, beaming smiles for the local papers. But behind the iron gates, it was a performance. Meals were silent rituals, conversations curated. My father ruled, my mother complied, and I felt like a ghost in my own home. I still remember Lucia and I, sneaking into the garden, lying in the grass, watching clouds drift. She'd talk about painting the world as she saw it, free from expectations. I'd promised we'd leave this place someday, but the mention of leaving always silenced her, a fear in her eyes. She loved our parents, despite everything. I, on the other hand, gave up trying to please my father long ago. At 19, I bolted to Nashville, became a freelance photographer. I just wanted to be Mason, not Harrison Beaumont's son. But the ties to family, they never fully severed. I'd return for holidays, for obligatory events, and each time, the air in that estate felt thick, suffocating. Dinners were graveyard quiet, punctuated only by my father's cold questions about my work, not out of care, but to check if I'd disgraced the name. My mother would try to lighten the mood, her eyes always darting to him for approval. Lucia, in rare moments, would sneak me a small, knowing smile. A silent promise that she was still there. Still my sister. Everything seemed calm on the surface, like a perfectly still lake. But I knew currents were stirring beneath. Sitting alone in my Nashville apartment, I often wondered if the Beaumont facade could hide its cracks forever. I felt the storm coming, and I feared we wouldn't survive it. The first crack showed at the annual community event. A crisp autumn day, violins in the air, my father charming politicians, my mother gracefully mingling. Lucia, radiant in a pale green dress, moved through the crowd like a gentle breeze. But that day, her eyes held a new light, a genuine spark, as if she guarded a secret. I didn't think much of it until I saw her pause near a secluded corner. There stood Eli Turner, a mechanic, a hardworking, down-to-earth guy from the outskirts of town. I'd met him a few times. Lucia and Eli talked, polite at first, but their eyes lingered. From a distance, I felt it, an invisible thread pulled taut between them. Their relationship bloomed quietly, like wildflowers. Lucia started making excuses, slipping away from our tedious gatherings. I knew she was meeting Eli. Small cafes, quiet park corners at sunset. I once saw them by the river, laughing, hands clasped. My heart warmed. Lucia looked truly happy, like she'd found a piece of herself. But that happiness was fragile. It wasn't long before rumors spread. Franklin was a small town. Secrets had a way of finding air. My mother's friends saw them, a charity guest whispered. Those murmurs reached my father. And when Harrison Beaumont was displeased, the world stopped. I remember that dinner vividly. The dining room air was lead-heavy. My father, icy eyes, lips pressed thin. My mother, trembling as she poured water. Lucia across from me, head bowed, golden hair hiding her eyes. Silence. Only the clink of cutlery. Then my father's voice, low and sharp as a blade. Lucia, where were you this afternoon? She looked up, attempting a smile, her lips quivering. I was just taking a walk, father. A walk! He raised an eyebrow, his gaze drilling into her. With a mechanic? The room froze. My mother stopped breathing. My heart pounded. I wanted to protect her, but my throat tightened. He's a good person, father, Lucia whispered. Good! My father roared, booming like thunder. A lowlife, uneducated, nameless nobody. And you dare call him good? You're disgracing the Beaumont name. Tears silently fell onto Lucia's untouched plate. My mother quickly intervened, her voice trembling. Harrison, please calm down. It's probably just a misunderstanding. But her eyes were vacant. She didn't believe her own words. I watched them, a quiet anger smoldering in my chest, knowing if I spoke, things would only worsen. From that day, Lucia changed. She spoke less, retreating to the garden, her easel and paints. Her art grew darker, heavy grays, deep blues, painting her inner turmoil. She avoided family events, clinging to the last scraps of freedom, the happiness she'd found with Eli. Then, late one evening, she knocked on my Nashville apartment door. Her hair disheveled, eyes gleaming with joy and fear. Mason, she whispered, gripping my hands. I'm pregnant. I was stunned. Part of me wanted to hug her, congratulate her. The joy in her eyes was so clear. But another part knew this news was a bomb set to detonate in the Beaumont household. Lucia, I asked, my voice hoarse, have you told our parents? She shook her head, tears streaming. I know they won't accept it, but I love Eli. He's everything I've ever dreamed of. I believe they'll understand if I can just explain. I hugged her, my heart heavy. I knew my father. His sense of honor mattered more than anything, even his daughter's love. The next day, Lucia told them. As expected, my father erupted. He called Eli a gold digger, Lucia a traitor to the Beaumont blood. He locked her in the house, cut her off, made her a prisoner. My mother, always silent, grew more haggard, as if each of his words was a knife. I tried to speak up, to tell him Lucia had a right to love, that honor wasn't everything. He looked at me like a stranger, contempt in his eyes. Mason, he said, cold as ice, say one more word, and you're a traitor to this bloodline too. I felt powerless, but I couldn't. Watch Lucia be caged. I met her secretly at night, whispering through her locked bedroom door, promising I'd find a way. But before I could act, Lucia took matters into her own hands. One night, she ran away with Eli. She left a brief note on my desk. Mason, thank you. I'll be okay. The next morning, Franklin buzzed. Rumors spread like wildfire. My father, with his wealth and influence, quickly silenced the gossip. He publicly announced Lucia had gone to study art in Europe, a prestigious program. The local papers, dependent on the Beaumonts, dutifully echoed the lie. But I knew the truth. Lucia chose love, even if it cost her everything. After she ran, Lucia vanished. No letters, no calls, no trace. My father, with his power, erased every clue. The newspapers stopped reporting, the whispers faded. Lucia Beaumont was buried under a fabricated story. But sometimes, in Nashville, vague rumors reached me. Someone saw a girl like Lucia in a small town south of Franklin, living in an old wooden house with a man. I wanted to believe it, wanted to believe she was happy. But my heart ached. I hadn't protected her. I hadn't kept my promise. My father forbade her name in the house. If my mother or I slipped, he'd glare, his voice low and cutting. This family has no such person. My mother would lower her head, silent, while I clenched my fists. Dinners became lifeless rituals. My mother grew thinner, her eyes red and swollen, but she never spoke. She carried the guilt, but chose silence to preserve the perfect Beaumont image. Months passed. Lucia's name slowly faded. I returned to Nashville, to my photography. But every time I picked up my camera, I saw her face, her radiant smile, her dreamy eyes. I wondered where she was, if she was happy, if her child had been born into love. No answers. Only long nights, watching city lights, praying for my sister. Then, one morning, everything changed. My mother's trembling voice on the phone. "Mason, come home now. Something important has happened." Dread surged. I drove frantically to Franklin. The estate air was heavy. My father sat, holding a white envelope with the seal of Colton County Hospital. My mother stood behind him, pale, hands clasped. Martha, the housekeeper, in the corner, teary-eyed. My father pushed the envelope toward me, his voice low, deathly. "Read it." My hands trembled. The words danced. Lucia Beaumont had died after childbirth due to complications. She passed away just hours after delivery, alone, no family, no husband. The newborn was alive, temporarily under hospital care. No one had claimed the child. I read it over and over, as if to change the words. But it was real. Lucia, my sister, dead. Alone. I collapsed. 2 days ago, my father said, his voice hoarse. 2 days. He kept it secret, as if his daughter's death was just a detail to be handled discreetly. My mother burst into tears, but wouldn't look at me. I wanted to scream, to smash everything, but I just sat there, numb. Lucia's radiant smile, now a knife in my heart. Her funeral was swift, discreet, held on the estate grounds. Only a few relatives. No press, no whispers of a truth. My father wanted to protect the Beaumont reputation. He didn't even mention the baby. "Everything has been handled," he said curtly. I wanted to ask, to know where the child was, but his gaze was a stone wall. "Don't interfere, Mason," he said, cold as ice. "This isn't your concern." The funeral was misty. Lucia lay in a white coffin, surrounded by lilies, her favorite, peaceful as if asleep. But she wasn't there. My mother stood, frail as a shadow, eyes red but dry. The few attendees mourned the image of a perfect Beaumont daughter. No one dared mention the woman who loved the wrong man, who ran to live her truth. I stood before her portrait, overwhelmed with guilt. I hadn't protected her. She didn't die from childbirth. She died because she was denied the right to live freely. Rejected. After the burial, everyone left. I asked my father about the baby again. He turned away. My mother's eyes pleaded, but she said nothing. I knew she was dying inside, but lacked the courage. That night, I stayed behind, the Franklin mist cold and thick. I stood before Lucia's grave, remembering our childhood, running through the garden, laughing. "Mason," she'd said, "one day I'll paint the whole world, and you'll capture it with your camera, okay?" I promised. Now I stood here, before a cold gravestone, with promises unkept. I knelt, hand on the earth, whispering, "Lucia, I'm sorry." Tears blended into the mist. Weeks later, I visited my mother. I dreaded stepping into that gloomy house, but couldn't leave her alone. She was frail, her soul seemingly gone with Lucia. The air was suffocating. Lucia's name was taboo. My father maintained a steel exterior, but I glimpsed a lost look in his eyes. My mother was a ghost. I wanted to break the silence, but her eyes held only unspoken pain. I needed air. I walked to the garden, where Lucia and I used to play. The creek babbled. I stopped, took a deep breath. Then I remembered the time-lapse camera I'd set up months ago to capture nature. It was still there, hidden under foliage, silently recording. I retrieved it, hoping the images would comfort me. But when the screen lit up, my heart stopped. Hours earlier, at sunset, the camera had captured something I never could have imagined. My parents appeared by the creek, rigid, as if doing something forbidden. My father held a small wooden box wrapped in white cloth, his face tense, eyes scanning the surroundings. My mother stood beside him, head bowed, hands clenched. Then, with a chilling resolve, my father released the box into the creek. It floated silently with the current. They turned and walked away, as if nothing had happened. I stood frozen, gripping the camera, my heart pounding. What was in that box? A chilling dread surged. I couldn't make sense of it, but something was terribly wrong. I ran along the creek, my eyes fixed on the water, searching. Nearly a mile, my breath ragged, feet slipping. Then, among tangled roots, I saw it. The small wooden box, swaying gently. I rushed forward, icy water soaking my shoes. I lifted the box, my hands trembling. It was heavier than I expected, and as I touched it, I felt a fragile sense of life within. My heart raced, threatening to burst. I set the box on the bank, opened the lid, and the world seemed to stop. Inside, wrapped in white cotton, was a newborn baby. Its lips were bluish, eyes closed, but its tiny chest rose and fell faintly. It was alive. I was stunned. This baby, I was certain, was Lucia's child. The grandchild my father had said was handled. My heart tore apart. My parents, the people who raised me, who taught me about honor. They had done this, set a baby adrift, left it to die. The honor of the Beaumont family, which my father placed above all else, had turned him into someone I no longer recognized. I clutched the baby to my chest, pulling my jacket around it. Hot tears streamed down my face as I ran toward the main road. The creak sound behind me felt like an accusation. I didn't know what to do, only that I had to save this child, protect it from the world that had taken its mother. I ran, heart pounding, gasping for breath. I couldn't stop. In that moment, I understood the Beaumont honor wasn't just a facade. It was a monster, ready to devour even humanity itself. My parents, for the sake of their reputation, abandoned their own flesh and blood. I couldn't forgive them, couldn't comprehend it, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't let this baby suffer the same fate as its mother. That night, I left the estate with the child, drove to Nashville, holding it close, feeling its faint breath. I didn't know the future, didn't know how I'd face my parents, but I knew this was a new chapter, one woven with love, guilt, and the shadow of redemption. I looked down at the baby, its eyes fluttering open, and whispered, "Lucia, I won't let your child suffer. I promise." I didn't return to my old apartment. If my parents found out, they'd cover it up. I drove to a small town, an hour from Franklin. The night was bitterly cold, but all I saw were the baby's bluish lips. I found a private clinic, a flickering neon sign, a final flame of hope. I pounded on the door until a nurse opened it, her eyes widening at the sight of me clutching a newborn, jacket soaked. "Help me," I whispered. "The baby needs to be saved." She ushered me into the ER. Hours passed like a slow nightmare. I sat, hands trembling, the sharp smell of antiseptic thick in the air. The doctor, a calm, middle-aged man, worked tirelessly. I didn't dare take my eyes off the ICU door. After an eternity, he emerged. "He's stable," he said, "but the boy is very weak. A few hours later, he might not have made it." A boy, Lucia's son. A boulder lifted from my chest. I was led to a room where he lay in an incubator, tiny, fragile, but alive. I placed my hand on the glass, tears streaming. "Thank you, Lucia," I whispered. "You were strong until the end." I named him Lucian, meaning light. My prayer was that his life would rise above the darkness he was born into, above the world that had taken his mother. I couldn't let him grow up in the deceit of the Beaumont family, bound by the honor that destroyed Lucia. I had to protect him, no matter the cost. I found a new, small place in Nashville, a quiet corner where no one knew me. I filed papers to adopt Lucian as a single foster father, using my photography studio address to sever ties with Franklin. I told no one. I cut every thread that could lead them to him. Each day, I cared for him, diapers, bottles, sleepless nights. My life revolved around Lucian. Simple, but deeply meaningful. I wasn't Mason Beaumont heir. I was just Mason, a father to a boy who needed love. Every time I looked at Lucian, I saw Lucia. Her clear blue eyes, the innocent smile she'd had as a child, the serenity she was never allowed. Sometimes, when he slept, I sat watching, and it felt like she was still there, smiling at me. But then, the memory of the creak, of the wooden box, yanked me back to reality. I couldn't forgive my parents. Couldn't fathom how they could abandon their own flesh and blood for an empty reputation. In the long nights, with Lucian sleeping soundly, I sat at the kitchen table writing. Every detail, from Lucia's death notice to opening that box by the creek. Those pages were an indictment, a record of the Beaumont sins. I tucked them into a locked drawer, not for revenge, but to remind myself to do right by Lucian. Under the dim light, I vowed to raise him as my own, to give him a life of freedom, unbound by honor or bloodline. Lucian would not live in the cage Lucia had tried to escape. My parents carried on as if nothing had happened. They believed the baby was handled. They attended charity galas, smiled for cameras, upheld the flawless Beaumont image. I didn't know if they ever thought of Lucia, if they felt guilt. All I knew was that every time I looked at Lucian, I saw a part of Lucia living on, and I would do anything to protect that light. Over the years, I gradually cut contact. I returned for holidays, but only to check on my mother. Visits were brief, awkward. My father still asked about my work, never my life. My mother looked at me with sad eyes, wanting to say something, lacking the courage. I kept Lucian a secret. I knew if they found out, they'd try to control him, pull him into the world I'd sworn to shield him from. But deep down, I knew the truth couldn't stay buried forever. One day, those pages in the locked drawer would be opened. And when that happened, the honor my father had guarded his entire life would crumble. I didn't long for that day, but I didn't fear it either. I had chosen my path, love and redemption. The path Lucia couldn't walk to the end. 8 years quietly passed since that night. I've learned that true love isn't in grand promises, but in simple moments. A hug, a smile, the look in a child's eyes. I'm a quiet man now, living discreetly in a small house outside Nashville. It's nothing special, but it has a colorful little room for Lucian. Our life is simple, sometimes challenging, but brimming with love. I work freelance, but no matter how busy, I always make time for Lucian, the 8-year-old boy who became my world. Lucian is remarkable. Intelligent, sensitive, with a talent for painting that leaves me in awe. Every time he picks up a brush, it's as if Lucia comes alive. His strokes are vibrant yet gentle, like her whispered dreams. He loves painting fields, streams, sunlight on leaves. I often watch him, my heart aching at his clear blue eyes, so like Lucia's, reminding me of my promise. Life isn't always easy. Some nights, I worry about money, Lucian's future. But every time he runs to me, wrapping his arms around me, shouting, "Dad Mason, look at this painting," all my exhaustion fades. I'm not his biological father, but to me, Lucian is everything. I've taught him to tie his shoes, to hold a camera, to face tough days with a smile. I want him to believe life, however harsh, is always worth loving. There were times when work took me away and I couldn't bring Lucian. Reluctantly, I'd send him to the Beaumont estate to stay with his grandparents. The first time, my heart twisted with fear. I was terrified they'd suspect something, see the truth in his eyes. To prevent that, I crafted a story. Lucian was the son of an old colleague who saved my life. When he died, I promised to care for his son. My parents didn't ask many questions, perhaps not wanting to dig deeper, or just used to my unconventional life. But I knew, every time I brought him to Franklin, I was walking a tightrope. Lucian quickly won their affection. My father, usually stern, softened around him. He admired Lucian's politeness, his confident answers. "This child is well raised," he once said, and I forced a smile, hiding the pain. My mother was different. She looked at Lucian with a mix of love and pain, as if seeing a familiar shadow. I once caught her watching him paint in the garden, his soft hues, blues, yellows, pinks, strikingly similar to Lucia's old work. Her eyes welled up, but she said nothing, turning away as if looking too long would break her. I knew my mother sensed something. There were moments she held Lucian, stroking his hair, her hands trembling. "This boy is special, Mason," she once choked out. "It's as if he carries a piece of someone we lost." I only nodded, unable to meet her eyes. I was afraid if I said anything, the truth would slip, and everything would collapse. My father paid less attention, seeing Lucian as a well-mannered, artistic child, proof that I'd finally done something right. But for my mother, her heart was stirring. Every painting, every smile was Lucia, the daughter she hadn't protected. Each night as Lucian slept, I sat by his bed, watching his peaceful face. Those moments made me realize the truth, however buried, was finding its way back. It lived in Lucian's eyes, his brushstrokes, his smile. I knew one day I'd have to face my parents, Franklin, the world. But when that day came, I wouldn't let Lucian suffer as his mother had. I lived for that promise, for my love for Lucian, for the belief that his light would dispel the darkness of the Beaumont family. But the tightrope wouldn't hold forever. The truth, like Lucian's paintings, would eventually come to light. And I'd have to face everything. That spring, a strange breeze swept through Nashville. Everything was about to change. I sat watching Lucian paint by the window, his brush dancing across the canvas. At 8, his talent far surpassed his age. Each painting, a story, a dream. One morning, I read about the young talents of Tennessee competition. I looked at Lucian painting a stream under the sunset. This was his chance to shine, to let the world see the light Lucia had left behind. "Lucian," I called softly, "would you like to try entering a painting competition? Just for fun, and you might meet other kids who love to paint." He looked up, blue eyes sparkling but hesitant. "I don't know, Dad Mason. What if people don't like my paintings?" I smiled, ruffling his hair. "They'll love them, because they're as beautiful as you are." A few days later, he nodded, a spark of confidence in his eyes. We prepared. Lucian chose an idea he'd nurtured, the garden behind the Franklin estate, where he'd painted with Grandma Beatrice. He titled it The Garden at Dusk. I watched him meticulously mix colors, each brushstroke a whisper of their shared memories. The day of the competition arrived. Nashville glowed. The venue burst with color. Lucian stood, small but confident, clutching his carefully wrapped painting. My heart pounded with pride and nervousness. When his name was called, Lucian stepped forward, placing his painting on the easel. Every eye in the room fixed on him. The Garden at Dusk was a masterpiece. Hues of gold, orange, and blue blended, recreating the Franklin garden like a dream, both tender and vibrant. Murmurs of praise, judges' smiles. Lucian had done something extraordinary. The results were announced. First place goes to Lucian for his work. The Garden at Dusk. The room erupted. Lucian stood, cheeks flushed, his smile as bright as the sun. He ran to me, whispering, "Dad Mason, I did it." I hugged him tightly, tears falling silently. It wasn't just Lucian's victory. It was Lucia's. Her light, shining through her sun. Lucian's painting not only won first place, but also a prestigious scholarship from the Tennessee Young Artists Association. Local newspapers quickly picked up the story, calling him the talented young artist from Franklin. Images of Lucian, his innocent smile, bright eyes, appeared everywhere. Franklin buzzed. Nashville buzzed. And while I was proud, a quiet unease grew. That spotlight, beautiful as it was drawing Lucian closer to the world I'd tried to keep him from. My parents saw the article. I wasn't there, but I could imagine it. My father, newspaper in hand, eyes lighting up at Lucian's name. My mother, pouring tea, hand trembling as she saw the photo. They called me, my father's voice brimming with rare excitement. "Mason, your boy has done something big. Our adopted grandson." Who would have thought? My mother said less, but I heard the emotion. "Lucian, he's truly special. Mason, like a gift." They began boasting about their adopted grandson everywhere. My father introduced Lucian as Franklin's young hope, full of pride. "This boy has a rare artistic blood," he said, unaware how close his words were to the truth. My mother smiled, but her heart was a sea of emotions, pride, guilt, a vague pain. She often told me about Lucian's visits, painting in the garden, how his artwork reminded her of Lucia. "There's something about that boy," she trembled, "as if he belongs here." I watched, joyful and weary. Happy Lucian was loved, but fearing the spotlight would crack the secret I'd kept for 8 years. Every mention, every brag, made the tightrope tremble. The truth, that Lucian wasn't an adopted son, but their grandson, Lucia's son, was closer than ever. I looked at Lucian, the boy with the radiant smile, and wondered if I could protect him from the coming storm, or if he would be the one to bring it all to light. I decided to return to Franklin, bringing Lucian. It was a spring afternoon, golden sunlight on familiar roads. Lucian sat in the back seat, sketch pad in hand, softly singing a lullaby I used to sing him. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror, my heart aching at his smile, so like Lucia's. I knew today would be the day everything changed. The day I'd face my parents, the past, and myself. In my coat pocket, I carried an old envelope, copies of hospital records, Lucian's birth certificate, papers I'd hidden for 8 years. They felt heavy as lead, carrying the weight of the Beaumont family's sins. When we stepped into the estate, the air was as somber as ever. My father sat, reading a newspaper, eyes sharp and cold. My mother stood by the window, teacup in hand, gaze distant. Lucian ran to her. Grandma Beatrice, Grandpa Harrison. He cheered, blissfully unaware. My father looked up, nodding. Mason, you're back, and our talented boy, too. He glanced at Lucian, a flicker of pride, but still saw only an adopted grandson. I smiled at Lucian to reassure him. Lucian, why don't you go play in the garden? I need to talk to Grandpa and Grandma. He nodded, carefree, and ran out to the front garden, where spring sunlight danced over the rose bushes. I waited until the door closed, until his footsteps faded into the sound of the creek. Then I turned to my parents. I took a deep breath and placed the envelope on the table. Dad, Mom, I said, my voice calm but firm. I have something to tell you. My father frowned, setting the newspaper down. My mother turned, her teacup trembling. Lucian isn't the adopted son of a colleague, I said slowly, afraid I'd lose my courage. He's Lucia's son. Your grandson. The room fell silent, as if the air itself had stopped breathing. The ticking of the wall clock marked the slow seconds, counting down the final moments of the honor my parents had so proudly upheld. My father froze, his hand trembling slightly, eyes locked on the envelope, unable to believe what was before him. My mother stumbled back a step, her teacup crashing to the floor, shattering. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and I saw memories flooding back in her eyes. No, she whispered, choked. It can't be. But as she looked through the glass door toward the garden, I knew she saw the truth. Lucian's blue eyes, his smile so like Lucia's, the brush strokes that carried her spirit, all undeniable proof. My father remained silent, hands gripping the edge of the table as if to keep himself from collapsing. I opened the envelope, pulling out the hospital records and birth certificate, placing them before him. This is the truth, I said, my voice steady but heavy. Lucian is Lucia's son. The child you left in the creek. The child you said was handled that. The air grew thick. My father bowed his head, and for the first time in my life, I saw him speechless. He looked at Lucian, the boy with his daughter's eyes, and I saw the collapse in his gaze. Gone was the commanding presence, the cold control. Only a man remained, facing his own guilt. My mother stepped to the window, trembling, placing a hand on the glass, looking at Lucian. Oh, Lucia, she whispered, as if seeing her daughter through the boy. I stood there silent, not accusing, not angry. I felt only the weight of 8 years lifting, as if I'd given the truth back to Lucia, to myself. Finally, my father spoke, his voice broken and hoarse. Mason, I'm sorry. It was the first time I'd ever heard him apologize, and it felt like a knife, both painful and freeing. He looked at Lucian, tears rolling down his weathered face. I was wrong. So very wrong. The truth was out. The honor my father had guarded with lies crumbled, leaving only regret and belated love. I didn't hold a grudge. I only sighed, shedding the burden. In that moment, the Beaumont family stopped speaking of honor. There were only 3 generations standing together. My parents, me, and Lucian. With tears, forgiveness, and a new beginning. I looked at Lucian, still blissfully unaware, but smiling. And I knew that no matter how painful the past, we still had a chance to start over, to love each other truly. In the days that followed, the estate was cloaked in an unfamiliar silence. My parents, once the centerpiece of Franklin's social scene, vanished from public view. Gone were the galas, the perfect smiles, the articles praising the model family. My father, Harrison, once an oak, seemed aged by decades. He spoke less, often sitting alone in his study, gaze lost in the garden. My mother, Beatrice, moved like a shadow, hence perpetually clasped, trying to hold on to something slipping away. They were confronting their consciences, the mistakes they tried to bury. They were in pain. I returned to Nashville, to Lucian. I didn't avoid my parents, but didn't seek them out either. My focus was on him, mornings to school, afternoons painting, nights singing him to sleep. Our life was simple, sometimes strained but filled with joy. Lucian grew every day, his smile bright as the sun, his paintings more beautiful than ever. Each time he picked up a brush, I saw Lucia. She lived on through his every stroke. All I wanted was to keep Lucian's world peaceful, to ensure he never bore the wounds his mother had carried. But then, one fall afternoon, everything changed again. I came home to find my father's sleek black Lincoln parked outside my house. My heart raced, not out of fear, but a strange anticipation. Lucian was playing in the front yard, wielding a stick like a sword, chasing a butterfly. My parents stepped out, their movements slow, carrying the weight of guilt. My father, weary but stern. My mother, red-rimmed eyes that lit up when she saw Lucian. "Lucian!" she called, her voice trembling. He looked up, ran to hug her. "Grandma Beatrice! Grandpa Harrison!" He cheered, unaware of the storms. I stood on the porch, watching, my heart constricting. My parents knelt, embracing him. Tears streamed down my mother's cheeks. My father ruffled Lucian's hair, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen, searching for a piece of Lucia in his grandson. They didn't say much to me at first. We sat in my small living room. Lucian played with his paints in the corner. My parents sat across from me, hands clasped. "Mason," my father began, his voice low. "We're here for Lucian. We want to be part of his life." My mother nodded, tears falling again. "We were wrong, Mason," she said, choked up. "We lost Lucia, and we nearly lost Lucian too. We're not here to make amends. We just want to love him truly." I listened in silence. I looked into their eyes. For the first time, I saw no fear of reputation, no cold control. Only genuine regret, the pain of parents who had lost their daughter and now wanted to reclaim family through their grandson. I nodded, saying little. "All right," I said softly, "but everything has to be for Lucian. Not for reputation, not for the Beaumont name. Only for him." From then on, my parents visited Nashville regularly. Small gifts for Lucian, paints, a picture book, a cake my mother baked herself. Financial support, so I could enroll him in advanced art classes. But more importantly, they spent time with him. My father, once so stern, now sat for hours listening to Lucian talk about his paintings, nodding with genuine interest. My mother held his hand, taking him for walks in the park, her eyes lighting up every time he smiled. Those moments were simple, but to me, they were worth more than any reputation. Slowly, we became a family again. Not the perfect family of charity events or newspaper articles, but a real one. Meals at my small house were now filled with Lucian's laughter, my mother's stories, even my father's clumsy questions about painting. I watched them and felt at peace. The past couldn't be changed. Lucia was gone, the wounds remained. But I understood that people could choose to live differently, to choose genuine love over empty pride. One afternoon, as Lucian painted, my parents sat with me on the porch. My father looked into the distance, his voice low. "Mason, you've done what I never could. You've given that boy a real life." My mother took my hand, tears streaming. "Thank you," she said, "for keeping Lucian, for keeping a piece of Lucia." I said nothing, only nodded. In my heart, I knew this was what I'd always wanted. A family that didn't need to be perfect, just brave enough to love each other truly. Our family life gradually became simpler and warmer. My photography captured Lucian painting, running in the park, laughing with his grandparents. Modest dinners where my father shared stories, my mother smiled, and Lucian chimed in. These photos weren't staged like the old Beaumont galas, but they held love, the kind I'd spent my life searching for. My father, Harrison Beaumont, once a symbol of power, stepped away from the business world. He devoted himself to charity, funding art scholarships for underprivileged children. I saw him at small exhibitions, listening to kids' dreams. Once, he brought Lucian to an event, and I saw him smile as Lucian pointed to a painting. "Grandpa Harrison, this looks like the one I did at home." My father patted his shoulder, his eyes alight, not with obsession for honor, but with the warmth of a grandfather learning to love. My mother, Beatrice, also found a way to heal. She reopened Lucia's painting room at the estate, a room locked tight since Lucia ran away. She cleaned it, hung Lucia's old paintings, and turned it into a creative space for Lucian. Every time he visited, he'd run straight there, sit at the easel, and create vibrant art. My mother would stand nearby, silently watching. "He's so much like your sister," she once told me, voice trembling. It's like she never left. I nodded, holding her hand, feeling the peace she'd rediscovered after years of fear and guilt. More than anyone, I understood that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It's learning to live with the past, accepting the wounds, and turning them into strength. I didn't forget what my parents had done. The creek, the box, Lucia's pain. But I chose to forgive, not for them, but for myself, for Lucian, for the dream of a real family. I began writing a memoir, chronicling the Beaumont story, from the stifling days under the veneer of honor to the night I found Lucian, to our journey of rediscovering each other. I wrote not to accuse, but to tell the truth, to remind myself that love is always worth more than any reputation. The memoir ended with a line I wrote one long night as Lucian slept beside me. No honor is worth sacrificing love. No tradition is nobler than compassion. Years later, when Lucian was older, he found the memoir in an old drawer. He read it, page by page, and his eyes welled up as he came to hug me. "Dad Mason," he said, voice choked. "Thank you for keeping me, for telling me about Mom." I held him tightly, tears streaming. Lucian understood. Our family had once been lost, caught in a whirlwind of honor and lies. But he also saw how we found our way back, through forgiveness, through the courage to face our mistakes. He carried that lesson not just in his paintings, but in how he lived, how he loved, how he faced the world. Our story ended on a peaceful afternoon in Franklin. Under the ancient oak tree in the garden, I picked up my camera. My father sat on a wooden chair, silver hair glinting in the sunlight, telling Lucian a story from his youth. My mother sat beside him, hand entwined with his, smiling gently as Lucian interrupted with innocent questions. I raised the camera, and as they looked toward me, I pressed the shutter. The photo captured that moment. My father, my mother, and Lucian, sitting together, their smiles serene, nothing left to prove, nothing left to hide. Just love. Simple. True. Looking at that photo, I knew the Beaumont family had finally found its path. Not prestige, not tradition, but compassion. Honor doesn't lie in bloodlines, but in how we choose to treat those we love. The Beaumonts once thought honor was everything, but we learned it only matters when built on love and sincerity. The truth can hurt, but silence is crueler. I kept Lucian a secret for 8 years, and with each passing day, I realized that the truth, however painful, is the only path to liberation. Forgiveness isn't about erasing mistakes. It's about freeing yourself from resentment. I forgave my parents not because they deserved it, but because I wanted to live a life unbound by the past. Sometimes a family doesn't need to be perfect, just brave enough to love truly. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between family loyalty and what you knew was right? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts.